Off the ball. This is News Talk.
Now you're very welcome back. So as ever, you can check us out on various platforms. I was on otbsports.com this morning. I saw a little article which caught my eye. Eoin Sheahan, why the darts made my Christmas. Eoin Sheahan, hello.
Hey Joe, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So for the uninitiated, Peter Snakebite Wright from Scotland is taking the Sid Waddell Trophy north of the border. He beat Michael Smith 7-5 in the final last night. The darts made your Christmas. Are you a recent advocate of darts? Have you been there for a long time?
I think I'm in the same boat as the majority of people are, a long time, but you get back on the bandwagon, the second, third week of December, and you switch it off for a while. There was a period of time when I was in school and midweek evenings had nothing else going on, when there was no Champions League on, when I would become a fanatical Premier League darts fan. But that's a long time ago now. But nowadays, it is just Christmas time. And to be honest with you, Joe, I'm not sure if you've been the same, but over maybe since the demise of Phil Taylor, since he's left the sport, it didn't necessarily have the same pull as it used to have. This year, it was just an unignorable pull, I felt, from the events at Alexandra Palace, because first of all, the pubs were closed at 8 o'clock. It was perfect to go home and watch the evening session. But second of all, the rugby and soccer calendars got completely decimated with COVID, and there wasn't all this competition going on. Now, that being said, there were a couple of nights when you had Liverpool on and you had the darts on, and at the start, certainly Liverpool would be getting the main screen, the darts would be on the laptop. But I found as Christmas developed, the darts became the centre of our sporting universe in this house anyway, because right. I think the idea of the television being a communal thing is still very much a factor at Christmas. And for a lot of people in our house who aren't sports fans at all, having the darts on television is a far more accessible thing for everybody to, chat about and be interested in, rather than Liverpool, admittedly, entertainingly losing to Leicester City. I still think that darts has this universal pulling power that goes well beyond, I think, the dedicated sports fan.
And this was a particularly good year, was it? Because I saw Pearl Snakebite having to say, there's no asterisks beside this win for me, just because several high-profile players had to pull out due to COVID, that this, counts every bit as much. So, but even with all the disruption, this year's offering was of really good standard and was really good fare.
Oh, unbelievable. It seemed that every single night we were getting a cracker. And Michael Smith, who lost last night, it felt that every single game he was playing was an all-time great. His matches against Johnny Clayton and Gerwin Price in particular were two all-time greats. The Rob Cross, Darryl Gurney match was absolutely incredible. The night Kim Huybrechts got knocked out, it felt that our WhatsApp group was going after each and every one of those matches saying, greatest darts match of all time. Yeah. But it kind of felt that this wasn't totally filled with hyperbole. It kind of felt that Wayne Mardle and co and John Part were saying similar things, as if the commentary team after every single match were putting these games into the pantheon of all-time great darts matches, which kind of gives you a little bit of comfort. And you're like, is it just the amateurish viewer here, or is this really the cream of the crop? But it really was, from what they were saying. For me, that one of the high points was Peter Wright versus Gary Anderson in the semi-final, because these are two names that a lot of people have been hugely familiar with, and perhaps two lads that have been a little bit older than some of the young, newer generation coming through over the last 5 or 6 years. And they just played out a barnstormer in the semi-final. And in many ways, I kind of like that Peter Wright won it in the end. I like how he did it. I think that he was a little bit embarrassed maybe with the fact that both of the players in the final ended up finishing with averages in the late 90s as opposed to over 100. The first time in 10 years that the winner fails to get over 100 on their averages. So I think maybe he was a bit apologetic about the fare of the darts. But I felt tension coming from Ali Pali last night in a way that you don't necessarily tend to feel. It is just this circus usually, and even at times in the final you don't feel that tension. But last night was totally different, and it really was just a sense of the older warrior holding his nerve better than the relative upstart.
So Phil Taylor not so long ago was clearly the dominant figure, and his treble percentages and his general performance seemed to be ahead of the chasing pack. Is it right in saying almost akin to snooker and Steve Davis, and then Stephen Hendry taking the sport on, and centuries going from being rare enough commodities to very, very routine. I have the group after Taylor more than matched the standard he had hit, or where are we now?
Certainly when it comes to those headline grabbing statistics, we are. Like if you look at 9 darters, first of all, we got 3 in this year's competition. That's more than any other year. Like, I mean, if you go way back, this was a bizarre occurrence, let alone a rare one. You would have got 52 grand, for example, for hitting a 9 darter in 1982, 8 times higher than the winner's purse. So it just didn't happen. Right. They were a rare occurrence. This year, 3 of them in the one competition. So that is a record. If we go and we drill into potentially some of the bigger scores when it comes to the, let's say, one match averages, for example, and we look at this in the context of Phil Taylor. So if you look at the top 10 one match averages at the World Darts Championships alone, take Phil Taylor out of that, the rest of the top 10 have been hit since 2010. Then if you look at the losing averages, all of them have been hit since 2016. All of the top highest losing averages of the World Darts Championships have been hit since 2016. So this has gone up to a whole other level. And part of this is the Michael van Gerwen era of playing. And I don't know, it sort of felt a few years ago that he was being spoken about as the next Phil Taylor. And every sport is going to do that. Every sport is going to look for the next big thing. But it was because of what he was doing. It was because of these outrageous averages that he was putting up. Like the record average ever in the World Darts Championships was hit by Michael van Gerwen in a 2017 semi-final when he hit a 114, just over a 114. He hits 107 on average in the final. So you can imagine, if you go back to 2017, the way in which he wins that, we're all like, right, okay, this is the new era. Phil Taylor himself potentially couldn't actually hold a candle to this. But as we now know, that hasn't materialised for a number of different reasons. And I know you're going to hate this, Joe, but I think there's actually a really, potentially too easy comparison here between darts and golf. And you'd be able to outline this much better than I would. But it definitely felt that at the start of 2020, when Bryson comes into things with his new biceps and his longer drive and he's bashing the ball 1 billion yards, part of our brains are like, this guy is going to take over golf. This guy is going to win every tournament. And the only people that are going to be able to match him over the next little while are people who are able to hit the ball as long as him. And the second part of that may be true, but maybe we rush into the headline grabbing thing like the 450-yard drive or the amount of 9 darters just a little bit too quickly, because as we saw last night, the way Peter Wright won it, it was the old adage of timing being everything in darts, or as you might say, hit your 180s for show and actually hit your doubles for dough, if we can actually rob that golf truism.
No, it's perfect. Very interesting. So you were really into this, and it sounds like the house generally at Christmas were happy to settle down, and this was good TV that worked across the board and full attention. I guess if you're sitting around with Barry Hearn and you're saying to yourselves, it's such a good product, so many people like it, how do we get the Eoin Sheahans of the world to watch this 15 more weeks of the year? What's the answer to that question, I wonder?
That is a very good question, because I'm not sure darts is in the place yet where it can compete with everything else on a sustainable level. And I think what we saw maybe over the past 18 months is football go into full saturation mode, and to a point it's managed to survive. I still think that people have got quite sick of football at this point, and the saturation mode isn't necessarily a good thing.
Everyone I talk to casually who's not working in it says they're sick of football at the moment.
Right, that's interesting, because I sometimes think it's just our job that maybe the Premier League, there's a little bit too much of it, but it is interesting that people outside of it are saying that. Like, the thing is, the darts is still there. Like, it is still on Sky Sports throughout the year, and people just choose not to watch it. I wonder, does it feel like just more of a Christmas thing where we still, by and large, don't take this thing seriously, that we fire it on at Christmas, and maybe because it's thick and fast, but maybe because we don't associate it with the dyed-in-the-wool nature of football or rugby or whatever it may be. Maybe it kind of feels like more of a holiday season sort of sport. That is pure speculation. I think
there's something in that. There is a touch of, it's Christmas, let's not take life too seriously. It's part of the jovial wallpaper to our Christmas, I suppose. Like, I wonder, I see this, I mean, my darts knowledge is genuinely very limited, but like, I know there are more marquee tournaments for sure, but it hasn't quite, the fact that I can't recall the exact name of them makes me think, to extend the golfing analogy or the tennis analogy, and Novak Djokovic is pitching up in Australia, like, can they not somehow take the World Championship and replicate it 3 or 4 more times a year? They haven't managed to do that. I know there are higher, more marquee tournaments at other junctures in the season. But like for me as the casual floater, it's very much Christmas and the World Championships and just everything else. And they haven't managed to get the equivalent of the Masters and the British Open or Wimbledon, those marquee events dotted around the calendar year for whatever reason.
It's true. It just has not happened whatsoever. And Sky have done such a remarkable job in making this what it is. And like the production quality on the darts compared to what it used to be is obviously on a whole other level. But they're bringing that to the table throughout the Premier League, throughout a lot of pretty much all the PDC blue ribbon events. Like they still have the rights. They're still bringing this to the table. And to be honest with you, it's midweek darts by and large, and there wouldn't be a whole pile of competition except for in Champions League nights when these things get up and running. So it's a strange beast, Christmas darts. Like, I mean, people checking in and people who genuinely are not sports fans following the sport of darts throughout Christmas is, to me, something that I still can't get my head around. And for me, it's the fact that somebody has it on TV and it's quite accessible and people can follow it. I mean, like you're explaining to people in the house that you need to finish on a double, which is the only rule of darts. Like, I mean, the crash course in darts is that you got to finish on a double, crash course over. Yeah. And all of a sudden, those people, a couple of hours later, are like, great standard, best standard ever. It's like they've been fans forever. So, like, it almost feels like I'm trying to turn your question away, Joe. The honest answer is I don't know. I don't know what's actually happening here in between, what's breaking down between these two things, because the standard certainly isn't the issue. And in fact, you actually see every so often a story spark up between a little rivalry developing between a couple of these players, which I would say is the exact thing the sport needs. But the familiarity throughout the season when they're on tour does breed a little bit of contempt. I'm not saying there's all-out brawls or anything like that, but there is a little bit of needle between some of these players. And that exists throughout the season, but the interest just isn't there until you get to whatever it is, the 10th, 12th of December. Yeah.
There's one text in. Who is Sheahan's favourite player?
Oh, darts. Darts is my favourite player. This is the thing. We're just here to watch good darts. I will happily forego any sort of attachment to a player as long as the darts is good. Like, and I do, like, I mean, it is quite amusing that we're like, you know, that the standard is so good this year, as if I could appreciate an average of 105 more than the average of 101 from last year or whatever it may be. It's like, oh, that is clearly a level up from last year. I will say that the closest I felt to supporting somebody this year was Willie O'Connor. And I mean, he played Michael Smith and he had a couple of opportunities to give him a hell of a game earlier on in the tournament. So like when he won 3-0 early in the round and smashed his opponent, I was on board the Willie O'Connor train, and sadly he lost in the next round. He's a hell of a player. Okay. Well, people can read your piece. It's on the website. You're documenting your love of the darts over the Christmas period. Eoin Sheahan, thanks very much. Cheers, my man. Thank you. Cheers, Joe.